Hi everyone. Welcome to this special episode of Svelte Radio about TypeScript. We have a couple of guests this time. Maybe we can start by introducing ourselves, I guess. So maybe Sean, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sean, also known as Swix online, and I've been sort of involved in like the Svelte community side of things. I previously was very active in like React and TypeScript, and I think the TypeScript support for Svelte has been always like at the back of my mind because I don't really like super use it, but I know it's important for a lot of people. I recently finished up a major project, so now I'm like a little bit more free to like dig in and dive in. And I think language servers are kind of the future of every dev tool. So I'm pretty excited as this is, I view this as something that's pretty foundational to Svelte but to like everything that is interesting in development. So that's me.
Yeah. All right. Anthony?
Cool. Yeah. So my name's Anthony. My online name is Anthony. I'm the CTO of Beyonc. I'm also a Svelte maintainer since sometime last November, December time. I can't remember exactly when. That's about it, really.
Yeah. All right. I'm Kevin. I go by the name Kev online or Kevmodrone on Twitter. I run a site called Svelte School, which has about 0 content on it right now. But it's coming, I promise. And I work at a company called Buddybase as well. We're doing a low-code kind of tool, actually in Svelte, so that's pretty nice. All right, our guests.
I'll start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Orta. My real name is Orta, and my handle is Orta. I know, I'm like Anthony. You have a weird first name spelling, and you get access to be able to use it in a lot of places. I've been doing JavaScript for about 2-3 years, but prior to that, I was an iOS developer where I do a lot of large-scale open source projects. And right now, I actually work on the TypeScript team. And so I you'll find out my roles and responsibilities and all this mess later. But until then, I'm here to say hi and cheerlead on.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Simon. I go by the nickname of Dumdidum. I work as a software developer at a company called Axo. And I'm a web front-end enthusiast. I have a long history with Angular, and last fall I toyed around with Svelte and got really hooked. And but the TypeScript support at that point was not that great yet, and I don't know, at some point I saw Orta's issue on Svelte, and I don't know, I just jumped in, and a couple months later here I am, now a core contributor to the language tools repo. Yeah,
that's nice. Great. All right, so for those of us that aren't huge TypeScript buffs like me, I've only dabbled in it. So what is TypeScript? Anyone want to?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Go on. I think of TypeScript as 2 different levels. TypeScript is a programming language that sits on top of JavaScript that provides a few extra features that makes it possible to scale your code bases via tooling, effectively allowing you to say, this function only accepts these parameters and it only returns this sort of thing, instead of you having to write tests to prove that. It's sort of like, like a very, very fancy linter that takes into account how all these pieces work. But the other angle of how TypeScript works is that it also provides almost all tooling for JavaScript. So a lot of like editor support in VS Code and like Atom, any popular extension for most IDEs uses TypeScript under the hood, in part because of what we're going to talk about in language servers. And TypeScript provides all the tooling for JavaScript. So if you've ever really had an error message that didn't come from ESLint in your editor, that probably came from TypeScript. And so TypeScript support represents both the TypeScript support for the language, but also drastically improved JavaScript tooling as well.
I'm already learning today. This is good.
I tend to view like I mean, we should probably ask Simon this, because I think Angular was like the big turning point in TypeScript adoption.
Yeah, I think so.
I wasn't around for that. I only started in JavaScript a couple 2-3 years ago. Actually, basically kind of the same time as Orta, but I've done a lot less. But the way I explain TypeScript is actually it's like an enhanced documentation. Like enforced documentation, like you're documenting your code, and nobody's against documentation. But I think like when you document your code, you want to get the most mileage that you can out of it. So why not have the machine read your docs and then enforce it for you, right? Like usually docs are meant for humans, but you can have machine readable docs that help you, that just like pops up like autocomplete information. It helps to warn you when you like accidentally change your function return signature, that kind of thing. So I think that's my 2-word summary is enforced documentation. But there's different perspectives on this.
What I also really like about TypeScript is that you can just gradually adopt it. So you have a JavaScript code base, and I mean, TypeScript is just a superset. So you can gradually add types, and the interoperability is just great. And so that it's really good.
All right.
Yeah, there's like many people having many perspectives on it is making it really hard to redesign the website and try and design like how we pitch TypeScript. But I think it's just, I think all of these explanations are all absolutely correct.
All right, that's great. So,
Cool.
So what's the current situation in Svelte land? Like, where are we at?
I'll let you take that, Simon.
Yeah, so there are actually 2 things to the TypeScript support in Svelte. One is the pre-processing that needs to be done for the build. So I don't know, if you use rollup, then you add the preprocessor from Svelte preprocess, for example, and that preprocesses your TypeScript and spits out JavaScript, and that is then handed to the compiler and the rest of the build, and that just then bundles the rest, and then your app works. But the other side is that you also have the IDE, the tooling. So if you're coding in your editor, like for VS Code, you want the syntax highlighting, you want the auto-completions and all those things. And that was lacking for most of the time since previously, I would say. And so Svelte preprocess was already around for quite some time, I think now. But yeah, I mean, if people talk about, I want to use TypeScript and where's the TypeScript support, they don't want to know, okay, I can add this preprocessor and then I don't know, I do code completely without syntax highlighting. I think that's not fun. And so I think this is the second part that is crucial to really get the adoption going. And yeah, this is what we are working on with language tools right now.
So this is language tools relates to language server, right? So what is a language server?
Yeah, language server, that's I think Microsoft invented it. It's based on the language server protocol. I did not know about that recently too. Yeah, it's basically a specification both the client, so the editor and the server has to implement. And the good thing about that is if your editor supports that, you can just plug in the language server and then just reuse the same language server for every IDE that supports it. So right now we have the official extension for VS Code, and I think, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, Orta started merging in the same for Atom. And I don't know, the glue code is, I don't know, it's one JavaScript file with 20 lines of code, and that's it. That's all you need to write to have the same support in Atom as well. So that's really the huge deal about the language server protocol, that the interoperability gets really nice. And
nice.
Yeah.
So would the same thing apply for like Vim? Do I actually have to run a server, or can I do the same thing with Vim?
I think Vim supports it too.
Okay.
Yeah, the server is an the term server in this case is also an interesting like counterexample. Like the server talks about server and clients. I don't, you can't see me air quoting, but if you're listening on audio, so that doesn't necessarily have to be a separate process. It like in the case of some of our things, that's just an npm package that like just talks over like I don't know, IPC sometimes.
Okay.
So the idea is just that there is a server and a client. And so the editor is always the server, and the language-ish thing is always the client.
Okay.
And the good thing here is you avoid build matrices. So I've been building developer tools for a while, and I used to work on like TextMate and things like that. And back then, every editor had to build every language support into the editor. And that meant C++ support was pretty weak because it was mostly focused on scripting languages, but Ruby was really good in this editor. And so you would kind of pick your editor based on how well a particular language might have been supported. But now effectively, like the tools for your language is centralized into the language itself. So the responsibility is shifted from editors building like integration, the editor makers building integration themselves, into the people that build the thing also make sort of the framework for their developer tools. That's why like Svelte language tools is in Svelte, the organization, sort of that's where like everyone does all the work instead of VS Code Svelte being different from Atom Svelte. They are all the actual hard work just happens in a single place.
Cool.
And that makes life so much easier in the long run.
So yeah, so you build support once and you put it in every IDE that's possible, or every text editor or whatever. That's very cool. So theoretically, a language server can support any language at all?
Language servers, so like any protocol, it's biased. So language servers are biased towards programming languages, which should be not that controversial. But I've been in meetings with like Facebook and Microsoft where we've had discussions about whether the language server protocol should be extended to handle build tools. And I worked on Jest's editor tooling, and there was a good question of like, should Jest, a test runner, be considered something that should live in a language server? Should there be a language server for your test runner because of its watch mode, and because the interactivity that I was building into the tooling was realistically a similar set of domains, and then all these other editors would get the same experiences just by having a tiny extension to the language server protocol that says, here's how you run a build tool, here's some of the feedback from that build tool. And so once you start thinking about the idea of sort of centralizing the way in which editors talk to tools, then you really could see more cases than what we see currently.
Cool. Very cool.
I'm looking at the language server repo, and so it looks like it's kind of like a there's notifications, and then there's requests and response. It's like a very very sort of basic constrained thing where you just publish events and subscribe to events, that kind of thing. Yeah,
so it depends on the level of abstraction in which you're working. For example, we use the npm module that's provided by the VS Code team. And so effectively, you just kind of have to create objects and put them in the right place and give subclass the right things. And it handles all of the back and forthing between you. But the language server protocol itself has set commands with set responses. And so it's, your job as the editor to make sure that you send the right commands when a cursor is moved or when a file is changed. And it's your job as this language server to respond to those events correctly. You don't have to respond to all of them, but the order in which you do things is important. And having an abstraction like the npm module just means that we don't actually, in the Svelte case, we don't actually care about the sort of API response JSON like data level of integration. We only care at this higher level of a document has changed, not necessarily here's a JSON request from an IDE with this bits of data. Does that fit, Simon?
Right.
Yeah, that fits. And also because it's written in TypeScript, we get the great types, and we pretty much know what to expect from the events that come in, and we know what we have to return. So that's pretty self-documented. That's really good.
Cool. Are we also, so just to be clear that we have all the pieces laid out before we sort of actually dive into each of them. How does the language server interact with TypeScript? Like, since we're trying to do some sort of type checking, right? Are we keeping some sort of how much are we doing? How much is TypeScript doing for us when it comes to implementing this Svelte language server?
TypeScript is all pretty much doing everything for us. I mean, there's a TypeScript language service. It's something that sits on top of the compiler API of TypeScript, and it provides all sorts of convenience methods for get the go-to definition at this point or get the hover info at this point. So a lot of stuff we do is just forwarded to the language service of TypeScript. And in some cases, we have to do some pre-processing or clean up some corner cases where we don't want to show some certain errors or something like that. But the main work is done in the language server of TypeScript itself. And that's really awesome.
And again, to reiterate, the JavaScript stuff does this too.
Yeah, right. So you don't need to have a TypeScript project for that. It also checks and gets the info for JavaScript, right?
Right. So all users of Svelte are going to benefit from this work, which is really
yeah,
great.
Definitely. Yeah,
that's great.
So okay. The next thing I was going to talk about was how do we use this? or is this published yet? Because right now it looks like I have to build from source or something. I just don't know what this. Yeah, I'm just looking at the repo.
So right now this is using. I'm just looking at the repo to see what's happening. Right now I have opinions now on build deploys, and you're going to hear it because this is the perfect case for it, which is not build on every commit, but deploy on every day if something has changed. So there is a nightly build of every single thing that's in that. Yeah, and then eventually, I keep bringing it up, and Simon says, here's the list of things. We'll get to that later. That's when we decide to make this production. Right now, this is a nightly build on VS Code that's classed as a beta that's version 99.50 or something, where it automatically increments the last version. So anyone can try it. Exactly what's on master right now, and we also deploy the language server on we do deploy the language server every day when there's a change, because it's less of a worry of that, because people will use a lock file to make sure that that's consistent on their own projects. So it's all available, except the new Svelte Atom that's literally in a PR that I shipped this morning, and I'm learning how to deploy it right now. But all this stuff just auto deploys.
Yeah, just go to the marketplace of Visual Studio Code, and Svelte Beta is the name, and then you get it.
Oh, okay.
So ignoring
Svelte language server, I confirmed it.
No, it's Svelte Beta. There's a Svelte. That's a really old version of Svelte Beta. It's we took over the foundation work was by a guy called Unwritten Fun. I don't know his real name.
James Birdle. Yeah.
Okay. And we took that as a base and kept going from there. And Svelte is still at this base. And once we are production ready, then we hopefully can take over this one. And all the 80,000 installs will be like, whoa, what's happening? So
Get
much
a million bug reports.
Yeah, right. Flooded with bug reports.
So there's like a drop-in replacement for James Birdle thing because he's not maintaining anymore, right? Something like that. Or this is the official one, basically.
Maybe it's worth just talking about the history of this, the decision-making process to make all this.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I'm definitely a foreigner to Svelte. I'm probably the person with the most amount of commits in the Svelte org that has basically never used it outside of a Hello World application. I was looking at all of the ecosystem to try and figure out what are currently the best tools, what is the best foundation, and so there's an issue that I wrote that described the long-term process of how we could get to Svelte language tools as being about as reasonable as views. So Vue has a core contributor that works on VS Code. And so he had used Vue as a way to kind of sort of prove out a few ideas about how language server protocol, how languages could work when they're sort of multi-languages. And he maintains an extension called Vetur, Vetur, and that had a few sort of very clever ideas about how to sort of maintain multiple language servers in the same thing. Because if you think about Svelte has HTML, JavaScript, CSS, all in the same file. And so how can you support JavaScript ecosystem to a very rich level, as well as do really deep CSS, or I think it supports SCSS and maybe even Pug. I'm not sure about Pug. I'm pretty sure I've seen issues with people talking about it. And so I pitched in the issue that we should take most of the ideas from Vetur and sort of reapply them in the context of Svelte. And so an offer to sort of help the foundations of that and sort of provide a direction and a sort of central way of describing how all these things should work. And I'm lucky that Simon came in and is actually doing a lot of the real work. But wait, what was my original point? But from there, it's mainly just been trying to figure out what is actually needed and how all the pieces come together. And a lot of that is now mainly done. And so we're trying to figure out what it takes to get to be production.
Yeah, big shout outs to Vetur because especially in the start when I had no idea what this language server thing is, and I just read through the repository, and a lot of early work is copy pasta from there. So it's really a great foundation, and so
sounds great. So
awesome.
Do we actually have finished TypeScript support? Can you actually use TypeScript support in Svelte today?
Yeah, you can. It's there are some. I think is an open bug about that you cannot import interfaces or something like that because it then screws up the build. But apart from that, you can pretty much use it, and also the IDE support is already quite good, I think. So you can use it.
Using it, and she's doing well with it. So it definitely works. It's good. I'm actually using the Svelte beta plugin in my IDE rather than using the James Birdle's one. I'm not using TypeScript at all, but I'm using the plugin and it works pretty flawlessly. In fact, I've not seen any real issues. So it's in a good place.
Good to hear.
Yeah. Good work.
Great.
I started pushing. Oh, go for it.
Oh, do we still need to use preprocessors then? Like, because you're kind of saying it's incomplete or something, but it sounds like we have to use both, right?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to move this to.
Oh, okay.
So perfect timing. Great question. So yes, we still have to use preprocessors, and there is an issue that I've posted on on the Svelte compiler, specifically about trying to add TypeScript support to the compiler in a way that doesn't substantially increase the domain in which the compiler owns. So think about it as like, we can add all this IDE level tooling, but it has to go through the preprocessor to be useful. And my pitch is there is a way to make it so that like just TypeScript support can be done in the compiler in a way that's like not a substantial amount of code to maintain. And that just means that TypeScript will work out of the box. And whether that ends up happening or not is still up in the air. But effectively, if that gets merged, then out of the box you get full TypeScript support, and you just have to change your script to script lang TypeScript, and then your sort of build process and your IDE processes both can just make assumptions about how all of this works, and you'll only need to use a preprocessor if you want to have something like Pug or SCSS, or some of the other different parts of your tooling. And so until that either gets merged or the issue doesn't get merged, until the core contributors agree on whether that's an acceptable trade-off, because it does break their rules a little bit, and opens the door for, well, why isn't SCSS included by default? And why isn't other things that other people like included by default? So there's a good argument that it might not ever happen. That if you want TypeScript support, you'll specifically have to have the preprocessor. But I think there's also the documentation side can just be a fix. Like even in the TypeScript compiler, we don't use TypeScript everywhere. For like scripts and stuff, we use JavaScript, and TypeScript supports, if you add at the top of a file // at top of the JavaScript file //ts-check, then you get the TypeScript compiler actually running and doing your documentation style linting inside your JavaScript files. And maybe that's enough, right? Like, then you don't need a preprocessor. Then Svelte, the compiler, just works out of the box with your TypeScript-ish JavaScript, and that's maybe enough. It's hard to say, but
yeah, but even right now with this thing not merged, it's really easy right now to get TypeScript support going, because all you need is the Svelte preprocess npm package. You add that to your rollup or webpack build, and then if you add the slang equals ts thing at the top of your script, then it auto detects that it's TypeScript and preprocesses that. And so for the build, it just works, and for the IDE, it even works without that, because under the hood we have there's a Svelte config.js you need for more advanced pre-processing stuff. So if you, for example, want SCSS or less or something like that pre-processed, then you need that. But if it's just TypeScript, you don't need that. And a fallback version inside the language server is used, which supports TypeScript but not more. And even that is only used to pre-process the Svelte file. So the Svelte compiler can then give us diagnostics that we can display, such as, hey, you've got an unused CSS class down here, or hey, your image tag should have an alt attribute or something like that. So this is the only place where the preprocessor is actually needed. For the rest, for the typing support, the preprocessor is actually not needed. So
I think it's worth mentioning actually that the Svelte preprocessor is another project that was created by Kaiserman outside of the Svelte org, and it's something we kind of brought in and blessed because it's so commonly used. It's almost part of Svelte anyway now. So much like the TypeScript support, TypeScript plugins, they've been brought in and made official. So yeah, I mean, even if it never makes it into core, it may become such a close part of the Svelte itself that you wouldn't even notice that it wasn't in core kind of thing.
Yeah. Or if we add a, I don't know, CLI or a TypeScript starter later on that just have this part right into the rollup config or webpack config, then people will never notice probably.
Yeah, it could be a little bit like JSX and React, right? Like JSX doesn't get shipped with React, right? It doesn't.
Surprising.
And so, there are multiple implementations of it, and you could in theory choose it. Everybody chooses Babel, but TypeScript implemented it completely differently. I mean, to the spec, but it's a completely different implementation. And people just have to include something that gives you the ability to include that language extension. And maybe it is just include Svelte preprocessor in your project. Seems reasonable. I mean, if it's that reasonable, I didn't realize it worked out of the box with TypeScript without having to actually do the config. That's new to me. So maybe
it's undocumented right now because I don't know. I maybe I shouldn't have said this now because now people are thinking, okay, I don't need this config right now, but okay, yeah. So for TypeScript it should work, but for everything else you need that svelte.config.js. Yeah, it's just that many people come in and say, okay, why isn't it working for me, or why is it throwing these errors? And I think to rightfully so that many people expect it to just work, and it's a little bit unique to an IDE plugin that you need a extra file where you add some preprocessor options. So I can understand that that's a lot of confusion at the start. So just lowering that entry barrier a little for TypeScript, at least. That was the goal there.
I mean, this has changed my mind on, like, are we at a point where we should start making a CLI template? So congrats. We should make a CLI template for, the what is it? dgit, I think, is used on the main website.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if that's enough, if you can do TypeScript support without the config file, I think we should make the repo for TypeScript support.
Yeah, that's pretty good idea because there's a few unofficial ones now, and they work to varying degrees and not, varying degrees up to date and not. So it would be good to have an official one, definitely.
Sounds good.
I was going to ask, like, I don't know if anyone else has questions, but like I was going to ask for, since we have Orta and Simon here, like I was going to ask for just a tour of the language tools. Like we're all on a video chat. It's actually very nice to onboard to a code base, and because like other people in the future might see this on our YouTube as well. Like maybe we could do a quick tour and then just like talk about the important things to know about this code base, because I'm pretty interested to get started on that as well. Is that a good idea, Simon?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, take it away.
That you weren't expected to be semi-live coding.
Yeah, we're just like touring around the GitHub, right? Unless you've already got the code running, and then we can see that. However you want to do this, I don't want no pressure, but I always think like video is always better to learn.
So you mean I share my screen and then go around?
Yeah, there's a screen share thing in the bottom if that works.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is the language tools repo, and it's basically all the important stuff is inside packages. It's also laid out here in the README. So first, there's the Svelte language server. This is the one that actually does all the work. Then there's Svelte check. That's a new command line tool where you can basically do a one-time check of all your Svelte files, and it gives you the diagnostics of that. So you can, I don't know, use that as part of a build step or just from the command line. Then there's Svelte VS Code. That's the extension for VS Code, and that is then shipped to the marketplace. It's just basically some glue code to connect to the language server. And then there's Svelte to TSX. That's from Half Nelson. We brought that into the repo about, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. And this is used under the hood by the Svelte language server to actually convert the Svelte file into a JSX file, so we can do the type checking and hover stuff around there. So that's really important, and that really gave us a big boost in regards of IntelliSense and so on. So where should we go next? Maybe the Svelte language server itself. If it loads. Okay, it loads. So
your computer's under pressure now.
Right. So inside the language server, there's this folder plugins, and that's basically the sub language servers, so to speak. So there's a subpart that deals with TypeScript support and JavaScript support. There's the sub plugin which deals with actually pre-processing the Svelte files and getting the diagnostics from the Svelte compiler. There's an HTML plugin that is also basically just a forwarder to the HTML language server from VS Code, I think, and the same for CSS. So if you hover over a certain thing in the file, in the Svelte file, actually all these are requested to provide some hover information, for example. And then the first one, which does not return null because he knows, okay, that is in my space. I know how to handle this. This one then returns the info, and that is then displayed. So so these are living side by side right now.
Well, I've said this once and I'll say it again. These are not separate processes. Each one of these all live in the same one process. So for us as an abstraction, they're basically NPM modules. Yeah,
exactly. So the HTML or CSS server that we forward this to, that's just a NPM package, and we just, for example, let's see the code. So to hover, for example, it's just the document comes in. Okay, is this feature enabled in the user config? If not, return null. And then it's just get me the HTML document, and then it's just we forward it to the language server. This is the HTML here. This one, the VS Code HTML language server. And that's basically it for the HTML stuff. It's just looking at, is this feature enabled, transforming the document, and then getting the infos from the language server. And this is the same for the CSS. And for Svelte and TypeScript, it gets a little more complex. I don't know. Should we introduce this?
Where does this .lang come from?
It's a class. So if I recall, these are subclass from VS Code.
This .lang is the get language service. This is just from HTML language service. So it just instantiates the language server right there, and then we just forward it to that. And to get the on-click and the other stuff that is done through this data provider. So it's just there's a specified format, and you can register custom attribute infos, tags, and so on. And these live in here, like Svelte self, Svelte component. So if you type that out, Svelte, inside the HTML, then it will show you auto-completion for Svelte component with the description and so on, because we register it down here. This is the data provider, and there the Svelte specific stuff for the HTML is added, and then over here at the HTML plugin, this is then used to instantiate the HTML language service, and then it knows about those, and then it's just forwarding it. I don't know. I hope that is understandable.
Is there attributes? I was just going to say, like, if the attribute checking doesn't happen here because this is all HTML stuff, this is more attribute checking is more in the Svelte TSX section of things.
Yeah, so attribute checking of other Svelte components, that is done in the TypeScript plugin. Yes. So this is just a normal HTML text that those attributes are done here, and then some more stuff is done in TypeScript plugin. Yeah, it's just it's just hard to getting used to that at first, because it's 4-in-1, and what is where, that's a little confusing at first. Was the same for me in the start.
That was great. It's a nice structure because it means everything's sort of scoped and does what it's supposed to do, and there's no sort of crossover, which is quite nice.
Yeah. What are the big sort of unsolved issues, or the things that you're struggling with right now?
What we're struggling with right now is the preprocessor stuff, because for some reason some of the svelte.config.js they sometimes don't get picked up, or the require of that preprocessor inside there does not work out the right way, and then people get this hey, you're using it seems like you want a preprocessor, but something failed there. There's a message for that, and some people get that even if they have a Svelte config set up. So this is one of the big issues right now. It happens mostly for SCSS actually, because most people use Node.js to preprocess SCSS into CSS, and Node.js is very sensitive to the Node version that is used. So if you use, I don't know what if VS Code is using as Node version, but if that does not match the Node version you have installed yourself, it will likely blow up, because the preprocessor and Node.js is then loaded in the context of that other Node version, and then Node.js will say, "Hey, no, that's not the Node version I expected," and throws up. And
isn't this because Node.js is a native Node module?
Yeah, that's right.
Would switching to Sass, which is written in Rust, would that actually solve the problem? Because I know that you can install a Node, you can either install one or the other. I try to use the Rust because it's native. It's not native modules.
Yeah, I think so. So if you just use Sass instead of Node.js, this problem will likely go away. Yeah, that's. I haven't actually tried that myself yet because there's another way you can solve this. At least I can solve it like this, but it seems like some people cannot. So there's actually a setting. So there's this setting. Where is it? Language server.runtime. So here are listed all the settings you can have on the Svelte beta plugin, and one of them is the language server runtime, and you can set that to the node executable you have, and then the language server is run with that node version. So the Node.js error should then go away, but apparently not for everyone.
Yeah, I think I've run into this a couple of times actually, even before the Svelte beta extension existed.
So it's stuff like that. This is basically the preprocessor. I mean, it's a really nice thing for extensibility, but in terms of this language server, it's kind of a nightmare because you have to think about so many things and interoperate with the user's code in a certain way by using its preprocess options and so on. So that is that can be a hurdle sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any more?
I have one more question. Just kind of thinking this all through. Do linting and pretty printing belong in the same layer? Because they seem to be handled separately.
Linting is done through there's a Svelte ESLint plugin, I think. And to get the linting, you have to install that plugin, and I think then it should work with ESLint, the extension. But I didn't look into detail for that.
Right. Does it make sense to link separately, or like should it be the same plugin? Do you know what I mean? Like and pretty printing as well. Like I've noticed that when I switch, for example, my template language to Pug, the pretty printer just like doesn't recognize Pug and just collapses all my white space for me. Very helpful.
Yeah, so printing is part of the plugin, but you can disable it if it screws up your formatting. So you can just disable this one, Svelte format.enable. If you just disable that one, then it will not format your Svelte files. And under the hood, the prettier plugin Svelte is used for that, which is also part of the Svelte.js org right now.
Yeah, it is a good question. Like whether those should live at language server, but I guess part of the problem, the air quotes problem, is that a bunch of these solutions were solved before there was a language server, and even then, like having it separate means that it works on the CLI. Well, now we also have a CLI that makes calls to the language server, Svelte check, to run all that same code against each build file. But realistically, there will be people that want to use different editors or do different things. Like, you know, having the ESLint integration makes sense for your linting rules. Having the prettier integration makes sense for your pretty like formatting, and trying to get the tooling to just be like, yeah, we'll respect that there are edges that we just don't touch from language service perspective, I think is a pretty good call. Like, we still need to call it. So like language, like the prettier thing, it should be integrated, but the ESLint, it shouldn't, which is weird. But I think the right way to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part
Fair
of
enough.
this is just it's still in early stage. It has to grow, and the format thing, for example, was already part of the old Svelte extension, so we just left that in. Yeah, but you can argue that maybe it's not the right place for that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth looking at what other communities do for this.
Just asking.
No, it's a good argument. Like, TypeScript ships with its formatter, but it doesn't ship with a linter.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it's okay.
All right.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, we follow things that other communities already established, and I think that's a perfectly defensible explanation.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any last few questions, or?
I think so.
I think I'm on my end. I'm good.
I have to go and play with TypeScript now. I have to know more now. I have to learn it. So
Yeah. That pitch in the start. It sold me.
it's working. It's working.
All right. Thank you guys for doing this. For spending your time telling us about TypeScript support in Svelte. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome, folks.
It's very, very popular.
Yeah.
It is, absolutely. Number one most requested feature. So